He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
And there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is world.
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the hottest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they'd transpired today? I'm your co-host, Sadaf and
And I'm Sarah Sahagian, your other co-host. And this week, we are joined by a very special guest, Mikaela Gorman. Mikaela is a producer, writer, and a pop historian with an encyclopedic knowledge of today's topic, representations of women and non-binary people in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Welcome, Mikaela!
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
We're excited.
Yeah, we're super excited because you know a lot more about Marvel than we do.
A lot more.
So I'd like to start by asking you and Sadaf, how did you guys discover the MCU and why are you or are you not fans of this IP?
Well, I'll say, I've never been the biggest fan, but God, I've tried. I've really tried. And it's usually been by friends or by my sister, who's a pretty big Marvel fan, who really tried to get me in there. I remember watching Iron Man the first time. And listen, I had fun in the beginning, but then after a while, I started to realize these were the only movies I would go see and I would fall asleep in the theater, which is kind of against my own personal religion. And I feel terrible saying that. But yeah, you know what? It just wasn't for me. That said, I do appreciate it. I think anybody who's a fan, I fully respect that. My God, you have stamina. But that was my case. What about you, Mikaela?
Unfortunately, I have been here far too long. I watched the Dolph Lundgren Punisher way back in the early 90s. I saw Howard the Duck. I was the first person in my town to purchase a ticket to 1999's X-Men. I have been watching these films far too long.
Sarah, what about you? Did you have a way in?
Yeah, and I hate to admit this, but like guys I was dating and then the guy I married, he is a diehard comic books fan. So I've even watched the Moon Knight series.
Wow.
Like that's how deep I am in now. I don't think I understand it, but I've watched it.
Oh, that's okay. That's normal.
You know, I would do it for Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke. Those are reasons enough. So I will allow you this one, Sarah.
That's fair.
As much as I like Ethan Hawke, he does not, in my opinion, make up for the series failings. But Marvel fans don't at me. I don't know. Maybe other people think it's a masterpiece. I won't get into that here because we have more important things to talk about, but it's a very weird show. So just as a warning, we will not have time to discuss all the female Marvel characters we love in this episode. If we miss something particularly interesting to you, please find us on Twitter and let us know. We'd be happy to continue this important conversation there. Okay. Before we get into a discussion about the failings of the MCU characters who aren't cisgender men, let's take a page out of Marvel's comic books and begin with the entertainment behemoth's origin story. Marvel Comics was founded by Martin Goodman in 1939. It was originally known as Timely Comics, which is not a great name. Thankfully, they settled on the Marvel moniker we know and love in 1961. Marvel Comics became famous for creating stories about legendary superheroes, including the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and of course, Spider-Man. And when you have so much popular IP, why not adapt some of those stories into movies? The history of Marvel's movies is actually longer than one might think. In fact, the first idea for a Marvel movie was supposed to star a woman superhero. In the early 1980s, Marvel began developing a project where sex symbol Bo Derek was set to play Dazzler, a disco singer mutant with the ability to turn sound into vibrations and light. So she can turn sound into energy. That's pretty cool. Screenwriter Gary Goddard was tapped to write a script. The project was also designed to include an epic album produced by Casablanca Records to accompany the movie. But when Bo's husband, the temperamental John Derek, was hired to direct, investors got spooked and backed out of the project. So, guys, I have to ask you, how might the MCU be different if it had started with a campy disco dancing female superhero?
So that, yeah, like, where do you even begin by launching about 25 plus years ahead of time and with a pure cocaine-driven disco aesthetic. I mean, this would have had Cher, Kiss, Village People, Robin Williams, Rodney Dangerfield, Donna Summer. Honestly, I feel like it would have ultimately led to a darker version of Marvel, like you see with how we constantly get darker and darker and darker and darker Batman.
Yeah.
And it's all a result of the reaction to the Adam West super campiness. And I worry that, unfortunately, we would not get the fun, happy, kind of poppy version of Marvel that we have now with the quips and the japes and the fun. We would get something that is overly serious and super dark. And
yeah,
it would have absolutely been blamed on Dazzler and Bo Derek. Everyone would have looked at it and been like, wow, that was a mess. The second disco was dead.
Oh, that makes me so sad, but I think you're totally right, Mikaela.
Yeah.
I also, though, I would pay good money to have this now. I would love to witness this and drink it right up. And listen, as somebody who, again, I have to say this again because I think it's part of my reasoning, because I'm not a big Marvel fan, having ones that are a little darker, that sounds delicious to me. But I get it because it's also not the point. It's not kind of what Marvel does and Marvel is. And I totally understand that. But God, I wouldn't mind it, I gotta say. And also, this sounds like it'd be so much fun. And it sounds like it would be a lot of things Marvel isn't today. And I would have just loved that.
There is, from this era, a kind of middle ground, if you are interested. There was a Doctor Strange made-for-TV movie that was supposed to spin off into a series. And it is 1970s porno psychedelia, essentially.
Yes. Please.
And the villain, Morgan Le Fay, is played by a young Jessica Walter. And she's just fantastic.
Sarah, does this not sound like something we would live for? Oh,
I know.
my God.
This sounds amazing.
I didn't even know about that.
What Marvel was or was trying to be at this time period, it's like it was made in a lab for us, Sadaf. Like, honestly. And
yes.
They should resurrect this Dazzler movie. Like this, I think it fits with the tone of what they're doing now. Also, they're experimenting with different genres and they've never done a Marvel musical. That seems to me like a huge missing chunk of the Marvel canon. Like they need to try a musical.
To be fair, and this is going to go good and bad in equal amounts. There have been Marvel musical elements before. There has been Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, which was so dangerous to both those in the cast and stagehands and the audience that insurance actually closed it. It was physically dangerous to watch and be involved in. But there was also, of course, the Rogers musical that appears in Hawkeye, in which we get an actual musical piece from at the beginning and end of the Hawkeye series.
Yeah.
And Agatha All Along, which actually hit the charts 2 years ago.
I'm all aboard Agatha All Along.
I mean, the lyrics in that Avengers musical in the Hawkeye show, wow, they were clutch. Black Widow is a knockout who will knock you out. Okay, yeah.
It's perfect Broadway.
Right? Just on the nose enough.
I just want to see dancing Thors, you know?
That's what we all want, I think. I don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't want to see a chorus of dancing Thors.
Yeah, I just want to objectify all of the men in all these movies. That's the conclusion so far for me.
You know what? That's not the wrong way to enjoy these movies. They're all handsome. I feel like they're all handsome for a reason.
You're right.
The 80s did ultimately see two Marvel characters make it to the big screen. First came the 1986 bomb Howard the Duck, and then there was the 1989 hit The Punisher. More movies followed in the 90s. During this decade, the comic book industry was on the decline. Marvel was in desperate need of money to stay afloat, so they sold the film rights to the X-Men and the Fantastic Four to Fox, while Sony bought Spider-Man. But the revenue generated from these sales didn't keep Marvel going for long. Fox had only paid a mere $2.6 million for the rights to X-Men. While Marvel did receive some of X-Men's back-end profits, it was a tiny percentage, just 2%. Selling the rights to their movies wasn't going to save Marvel Comics. So in the 2000s, Marvel took one of the biggest swings in modern entertainment history. The financially struggling company formed their own film studio. It's hard to overstate how much of a risk creating Marvel Studios was. The film rights to the publisher's most popular characters were already owned by other studios, so Marvel's only option was to adapt C-list superheroes like Iron Man and somehow turn that movie into a hit. Marvel borrowed $525 million to start their studio from Merrill Lynch. Their contract stipulated that if they didn't repay the loan, Merrill Lynch would get the rights to all of Marvel's IP. It was like the movie version of Squid Game. Either you come first at the box office or you die.
Brutal.
So put yourselves in the shoes of Marvel executives in the 2000s. Not knowing how this deal would turn out, would you have taken such a big swing? And also, why Iron Man? Why choose him to be the first hero that you bring to the big screen as Marvel Studios?
So I would not have actually taken this leap because there was no indication from the industry that it was the right move to take. The only films that had worked for them up until then, aside from the X-Men and Sam Raimi films, were little one-offs like Daredevil and the two Ghost Rider films, Elektra. And while they weren't massive successes, it recouped their small investment. And that was important at the time. Their investment in these movies was very small. And therefore, relative, the profits that they did get looked good on paper. They just weren't like actually good. So all sense in terms of industry predictions would have said, no, absolutely not. We're going to try to grow the franchises that do work. We're going to try to hit gold with one of these other small things, but we're not going to try to build like a multi-film universe or anything. We're not going to try certainly with anything like Iron Man. Mm-hmm. The only reason that you choose Iron Man, of course, is merchandising. You can come up with 1,000 different little armors variations that you can sell to kids, which is probably why they ended up pushing it ahead in front of Captain America and Hulk. Hulk, of course, got his own Ang Lee film, and that was weird. And I would also be semi-worried that if I don't work with these companies to produce something faster, they're going to give us another Roger Corman screw job. Do either of you know about the Roger Corman Fantastic Four?
Not really, no.
This studio managed to get the rights super cheap to Fantastic Four, and they hired Roger Corman, the cheapest director in Hollywood, to, for $1 million, produce a Fantastic Four movie. Now, they told all the actors that this is going to be a full film, and everyone's acting their heart out, and they told the effects people that it was going to be a full film, and they did what they could with about $1.75. And the result is possibly the strangest looking homemade movie ever for $1 million. And then they took it and they shoved it away and never showed it to anyone and pointed at the contract and went, "We made a Marvel film. You can't have the rights back." So I would definitely have been terrified that that would be the outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mikaela. I mean, having heard about all of this, so much of which I did not know. I mean, what an insane gamble. I think these people are wild, but I also have to say I'm really impressed at the gamble that they took. I think it's kind of amazing, but maybe I can only say that because it ended up all working out. So I don't know. I mean, it's pretty wild when you know the story of how they started out and put it all on little old Iron Man. And then added Robert Downey Jr., which I know you're going to talk about, Sarah.
Absolutely. I mean, I was thinking a lot about this, and I have learned to empathize with Marvel executives at this point, having done this much research. And I believe that they were trying to secure their long-term future. They didn't want these stopgap measures. They wanted to actually be able to expand and invest in their brand. And so I think if that's your goal, this is okay strategic planning. It's a risk, but if you know that if it doesn't work, you won't exist at all, and you think that it's better to try to grow or die than just stagnate and still probably fail, I guess go for it. I now believe that this was the right decision, even though it was unlikely it was going to work, even though it did work.
Wow. Sarah, would you say hindsight is 2022? Oh my God.
Absolutely. I think it's probably a little bit of presentism. I know it worked out, so obviously it was the right thing to do.
Oh, good.
So after securing the funds to make a splashy big screen adaptation of Iron Man, the project got underway with notorious Hollywood bad boy Robert Downey Jr. as its star. RDJ was a talented actor who gave a flawless performance in the 1992 Charlie Chaplin biopic, Chaplin.
Yes.
However, he had some personal demons. Between 1996 and 2001, RDJ was arrested on multiple counts of drug possession. He also did a brief stint in jail after breaking into his neighbor's house, where he was found sleeping naked in his bed, which is, like, that's pretty horrifying to find your neighbor sleeping naked in your bed. But
for Robert, a fun anecdote. Just hilarious.
It is, yeah, exactly. I mean, he had drug abuse disorder, which we know is a disease. It's an illness, but it also makes it very hard to be a headliner in a big budget movie. And so RDJ's problems with substances like cocaine and heroin were well known in Hollywood, and his career was on life support when he checked into rehab in 2001. But fortunately for Robert, rehab worked. This time. He'd been before. When Marvel came knocking a few years later, Robert Downey Jr. accepted the titular role of Iron Man. His salary for the first movie was a relatively modest $500,000. Having said that, Marvel, you could pay me $500,000 to star in one of your movies, and I'd take it. But it was a total steal at the time. The movie ultimately earned $585 million worldwide. So Marvel's big gamble paid off. And today, RDJ is known as the godfather of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now richer than Croesus, Marvel proceeded with their plans to turn other C and D-list superheroes into box office gold, bringing characters like Thor, Captain America, and of course, the Avengers to the big screen. These films made a mint and were beloved by fans who rushed to buy everything from Marvel-themed action figures to nightlights for their kids, and sometimes for themselves too. But until the release of Black Panther in 2018, a full decade after the first Iron Man was released, the movie leads were exclusively white men. Marvel didn't even have its first female movie lead until the release of Captain Marvel in 2019. None of the movies have ever given a meaningful role to a non-binary person, not even as a love interest or a sibling. So, if Marvel had launched their first film in 2022 instead of 2008, do we think they could get away with 10 years of blatant disregard for gender and racial diversity? If not, what do we think has changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's so interesting about Marvel is so much of the way they function is also the fan side of things. And from what I gather, again, as a bit of an outsider, is when fans stake up a bit of a reaction at some point, they're hurt. I don't know that they get the response that they want necessarily, but fans are involved more of a way with Marvel than they are, I would say, with any other genre. And I think we've seen changes in other studios and in other movies and TV series because of the Me Too movement, because of the Black Lives Matter movement. We're seeing a little more inclusivity, but oh my God, it's glacial. Like, it might feel like it's a lot to some people that we had Crazy Rich Asians and Black Panther. Crazy Rich Asians not being a Marvel movie, but that's my example. But Shang-Chi, for example, that's Marvel. But, you know, it's like we're having these Asian casts, Black casts, amazing. But these are very few and far between examples. And I think what's so devastating to me is we know, you know, if you look at the math, diverse casting means massive box office numbers. I mean, I think part of the thing is there is still an ingrained resistance, and I have to believe there's a bit of racism in that too, in the fact that it's taken so long, and it's going to continue to take a long time, unfortunately. But I do think things would have been a little bit different if it started now. I just don't think it would be that much. I think there's just a really big ambivalence, and part of that is also because the behind the scenes people, that whole team is still very white. It's still very straight. It's still very male. So there's so many elements that need to change. And unfortunately, I think it's going to take a while. I mean, again, as an outsider, I have to ask, when are we going to see a live action Miles Morales? Like, that also seems like isn't that long overdue? And of course, we first get him in animated
Spider-Man.
So many.
Like, so many. So why haven't they had a Miles Morales? Like, it's not like they don't revisit this IP basically every year.
Yeah. Now, in that case, I believe it's because Sony is greedily holding on to it for as long as they possibly can to get Marvel DC to pay a ludicrous sum for them, not to put him in one of their films. and two, allowed them to use him outside of animation.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, one day Disney will buy Sony because in researching this, I realized Disney buys everything.
They do.
And they basically have monopoly on entertainment. And so eventually he'll be back there and they'll make that Miles Morales movie. But it is, I think it is upsetting how slow the pace of change was. And I don't blame only Marvel for that because it's a problem across the entertainment industry. But at the same time, Marvel is so influential within the entertainment industry that they could be out there pushing for change more than I think they did for the first decade, because it was so obvious after the first Avengers movie that this was gold, right? And that people were going to come see it. So they probably could have had a gay kiss a decade earlier than they did. They probably could have had a lot more gender and racial diversity a lot sooner, but that's just my opinion. I know some people might disagree and say that they felt like they couldn't. I would say those people are wrong. Like, I think they could have done that.
Yeah, your opinion is right, Sarah, and you can say it. It is correct.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to say it. Marvel fans, I'm disagreeing with you.
Oh, what have you done?
It's our show. Oh. Marvel fanboys, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with Marvel fanboys.
Oh, no.
Okay.
What does that sound I hear? It sounds like a thousand terrible things coming this way.
Oh, God.
They don't listen to the show, but if they did, that would have made them irate, that statement. So what did the female characters in the early days of the MCU get to do while the men saved the world from forces intent on destroying Earth? The answer is not much. For the first 10 years, the majority of Marvel's prominent female characters were love interests or relatives of the male heroes. Pepper Potts spends most of the first Iron Man mooning over and doing literally everything for her billionaire boss, Tony Stark, who should have promoted her years ago, but keeps her as his assistant because he can't take care of himself. Sure, Pepper has the occasional moment of action, like when she blows an arc reactor, thereby helping Tony Stark to defeat Obadiah Stane, but she's mostly an ancillary character. Here's a clip from Iron Man 2 of Pepper Potts trying to quit her job as the newly minted CEO of Stark Enterprises, only to have Tony give her a shut up kiss.
Been in a tough spot, and you got me through it, so, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for understanding.
Yeah, let's talk cleanup.
I'll handle the transition. It'll be smooth.
Okay, what about the press? Because you only had the job for a week. That's going to seem...
What, with you, it's like dog years.
I know.
I mean, it's like the presidency.
There was a kiss there, by the way. I would have liked to at least hear that. I mean, my God. That's the other thing. It's all so just neutered. What is there? They offer us nothing. Oh, my God.
I know.
Yeah.
Agent Carter is one of the founding agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so she got to do that. And she's also a key player in training Steve Rogers and Captain America. But because she doesn't get cryogenically frozen, she's 90 and living in a retirement home by 2014, which is when the second Captain America takes place. So she doesn't get to do much. In Thor, Natalie Portman provides a refreshing representation of a woman working in STEM, but Jane Foster spends most of Thor 2 sick and waiting for Thor to save her. In a refreshing contrast, Taika Waititi's Ragnarok didn't have a love interest for Thor at all, but rather saw him partner with Valkyrie, a fearsome warrior played by Tessa Thompson, to save his planet, which it doesn't get saved, spoiler alert. And that's sad, but they try. The trailer for the fourth Thor, also directed by Waititi, suggests the trend of female empowerment might continue because it includes a clip of Jane wielding Thor's hammer. Of course, we have no clue for how long she'll get to do this. Will she be the main superhero in the new movie? Or is Marvel feminist baiting us with pics of a swole Natalie Portman? We're not sure yet. We haven't seen the film. One of my personal favorite MCU ladies is Gamora, portrayed by Zoe Saldana. Gamora is adept at martial arts and has a complicated relationship with her sister. But as awesome as she is in the Guardians of the Galaxy, Star-Lord, the most annoying of all mediocre white men ever to venture into space, still gets top billing. Instead, Gamora gets to be Star-Lord's love interest. To make female representation in the Guardians franchise even more abysmal, the second Guardians movie took Mantis, a beloved Marvel Comics character, and transformed her from a strong mystical being with superb martial arts skills into a submissive and lackluster character. In her review for Women Who Write Comics, Gretchen Small opines Guardians 2 director James Gunn, quote, saw fit to strip Mantis of everything that makes her a positive character, her strength, her fiery determination, her support of other women, and replace all that instead with an abused, submissive, and infantile Asian woman stereotype. Gendered insults and gendered violence are so integral to Gunn's portrayal of her that I have to sincerely ask, Mr. Gunn, do you hate Mantis? A notable exception to the MCU's most significant female characters being relegated to the role of love interest or a submissive stereotype like Mantis is Shuri, played by Letitia Wright. Shuri is a princess of Wakanda who's also Black Panther's sister. Black Panther also features arguably the coolest female love interest in Nakia, played by Oscar winner Lupita Nyong'o. Yes, she and T'Challa have mad chemistry, but Nakia also gets to work as a badass spy. If only all love interests in the MCU were so dynamic. It's impossible to say for sure whether it was intentional or just an oversight that the MCU's female characters haven't received much development relative to their male counterparts for so long. However, when Disney acquired Marvel in 2009 for $4 billion, they didn't seem to care that much about giving strong female role models to little girls. Instead, they were far more interested in recruiting little boys as Disney fans. Here's a CNBC interview with Aaron Burnett and then Disney CEO Bob Iger when Disney announced they'd acquired Marvel.
Mr. Iger, it's Aaron Burnett. I just have 3 quick questions. One from someone who's the father of boys, and they say perhaps this is Disney's effort to go after boys. You've got the girls market cornered. Is that one way to look at this, that you're trying to bring boys into the Disney family?
Well, we obviously have a lot of boys that are interested in Disney product, from Cars to Toy Story to Pirates, for instance.
Some into princesses, why not, right?
Yes, the princess and fairies, which tend to skew a little bit more to girls than to boys. This is a great fit for us because we'd love to attract more boys, and we think clearly that Marvel's skew is more in the boys' direction, although there's a universal appeal, we think, to a lot of their characters and a lot of their stories. Just look at the Spider-Man and the Iron Man films, which are pretty recent examples of Marvel product that was universal in appeal, that spans gender and age and geographic territory. So this is a great fit, but we obviously know that Disney has a lot of products that are more girl-skewed than boy, and we like the opportunity to go after boys more aggressively.
I love that he lumped in gender, age, and geography. Just that was so infuriating.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
It's such great executive speak,
yeah.
you know?
It is.
I mean, do we think the decision to focus on male superheroes was based on a sexist assumption that only little boys like superheroes, and then the further assumption that little boys couldn't or wouldn't root for women and non-binary superheroes?
That's absolutely a part of it. I think, I mean, I remember when I was growing up in the 90s, that was the case, you know, like your parents would hand you, if you were a little girl, you would get dresses and you would get little Barbie dolls. And my brother, meanwhile, was given all the little trucks, even though I wanted to play with the trucks. It wasn't for me. I mean, I think a lot of kids have that experience, but it's bullshit. Like, it's really bullshit. It makes me really sad. I also, because I think these characters are massive role models to a level that I don't even think I can completely wrap my head around because I didn't necessarily grow up with them in the same way. So they have such a massive impact. It's devastating when you think about this horrible quote that just came out of this man's mouth.
Yeah, it's definitely something that even Bob Iger of a couple of years later would not want to be associated with.
Yeah.
Because Marvel very, very quickly learned that they underappreciated the female audience and the response that they got. And all they had to offer was Gwyneth Paltrow being weird and a ton of Black Widow merchandise. And not everyone's into ScarJo and her more or less very, very flimsy character. Natasha Romanoff doesn't get interesting for a while. And to get there, you have to go through Joss Whedon treating her as kind of a sex object. Part of her character history is she has the ability to have children removed from her. All women in the Black Widow program go through that. But that's like a Joss Whedon addition that kind of undermines her character and like, you know, her validity in many people's eyes of like, oh, you're only on this team because you're not really a woman who can give birth. Therefore, you're now a killing machine. It sets a strange precedent.
It's kind of foul. Like, hearing that is just so upsetting. I don't know. The fact that they went to those lengths and thought about it to that degree when there are little children watching who are not thinking about it in that way.
Exactly. And meanwhile, none of the male characters have something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They have some tragic backstories, sure, but there's nothing that's like fundamentally, we don't see you as value according to this societal presumption. Therefore, this is the best you can do. If anything, it's the opposite. It's always rise above.
Mm-hmm.
With Black Widow, it was kind of, oh, well, find some good use for yourself, I guess.
The subtext with Black Widow, at least later on, is kind of that she leads the life she leads by default because she can't have kids or a family, that this isn't what she would have chosen for herself. And obviously, if anyone who's forced to undergo a hysterectomy, that is traumatic and terrible and awful. Like, no, we are not trying to say it isn't. It's just a weird addition to the character because the one woman in the Avengers they had for so long kind of was there. Basically, we were told because she couldn't do the conventional heteronormative thing of having babies and have family, right? Like, not because she wanted to save the world. And that is problematic, especially because it's not in the comics. So why add that dimension? Okay, so why do we think female title characters matter? Like, why was it so upsetting to so many people that there wasn't a Black Widow movie for so long, that they didn't have women title characters for so long? Why do you think that really was hurtful to people? Because I think it was.
So not only for just like general representation, audiences need representation or else they will abandon the product. I mean, that's just one simple thing. People started kind of peeling off briefly from Marvel after Age of Ultron when you got one more female character. It's another white woman. And also her name is a pejorative for a woman. Black Widow and the Scarlet Witch. So you've got a witch and a murderer. These are not positive images.
Yeah.
And so Marvel Cinema had to deal with the fact that on screen, they're very white or very male. But at the time, on paper, they had generated an incredible audience of readers, women readership, queer readership, people of color readership. And there was kind of a renaissance in story writing and storytelling at the time, and of, you know, representative characters and recreating characters and rethinking them. And so from even just a market point of view, it's not just a matter of getting butts in seats. This is how you keep your content fresh. This is how you keep your audience interested. You have to constantly be changing. And if you're just changing out one white guy for another white guy, you're not going anywhere new with your ideas. You're going to stagnate and you're going to die as a company. So even not even touching on like the moral aspect of you should be representative because of your size and industry, like clout and slice of the pie. You have to do it or else you'll run out of ideas. You'll start making the same Batman movie 9 times in a row.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'm not a DC fan either by any means, but I have this giant illustration of Wonder Woman in my bedroom, and she looks amazing, and she's South Asian, so it's this special little take on it by this amazing artist that I really love. It's beautiful, and every morning I wake up and I look at it. I'm like, that strong bitch. She is motivating the hell out of me. She's so inspiring. I think it every time I see it, and again, I'm not even really a fan, but that is the power of this imagery and this iconography that's been around for so long that it even connects with someone who's not rooted in it in the same way. Like, these characters mean something. And I think what it means to be a superhero is very instinctive in our world. That's just the way it is. And I think of Miss Marvel. I'm excited for Miss Marvel. And like, look at that. It's pulling me back in. And that's because here's a character who has the same background as me. We have Kamala Khan. She's Pakistani. I'm so excited. And I know there's a line that she says in the trailer where she says it's not really the brown girls who saved the world. And it kills me, but it also excites me because now brown girls are going to watch this and they're going to be like, I could do that. Like, that's me. And it's corny, but it's true. Like, that's how it works. So I'm really excited about this, but that's the impact, you know? So yeah, do female title characters matter? Fuck yeah, in every way.
Absolutely. Hands down, no question. And you only have to look at the success they've had. And there's a specific turning point in the Marvel films when they got the hint. They figured it out. And from then on, there's people of color representation. There's a lot more female characters with interesting qualities. There's a lot more queer baiting, but it's kind of in a semi-acceptable way. And that's from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 onward. Volume 2, of course, as you said, has some major issues with Mantis. But from there on, they're trying. And, you know, that's where you get Thor Ragnarok. That's where you get Stucky. That's Bucky and Steve, which they should have given us. Should have given us Stucky. At the very least.
By the way, have I read that fan fiction? Absolutely. Absolutely. I will admit to that.
But that's how we ended up inevitably with a semi-queer look at Loki, a semi-trans, maybe even look at Loki. A Loki who decided that they were not the gender and identity that they chose. We get a WandaVision that is playing with the idea of identity, not quite in the same way, but still, the entire current phase has little tiny things to do with identity. Captain America is now a black man, and what does that mean for that identity? What does Bucky's identity mean without his lover anymore? Who is Bucky without Steve?
I mean, these are all great questions, and let's hope Marvel explores them. So I think it's time for a quick break. When we come back, we'll explain why Scarlett Johansson's feud with the MCU started and how it led to her suing Disney, the Goliath of entertainment. Now let's discuss the female characters who have received the most screen time in the MCU. Black Widow made her debut in the second Iron Man movie and played a major role in the Avengers franchise, literally keeping the Avengers together when they lost key members during the blip. Black Widow is therefore the glue that holds the Avengers together, an organization which in turn holds the world together. And yet, that doesn't mean she gets the respect she deserves. Monica Castillo, one of my favorite film critics, once referred to Black Widow as the Avengers' token Smurfette. This is an audio format, so I can't show you all the leering shots where the camera objectifies BW in her black body-hugging costume, but rest assured, the male gaze is strong in the MCU. In Endgame, BW doesn't even get a funeral after she sacrifices herself so Hawkeye, a comparatively minor character, can reunite with his heteronormative family, complete with a wife and 3 kids. Notably, Tony Stark does get a memorial service at the end of the movie. Why the double standard? Probably because he's a man. Scarlett Johansson herself was not shy about critiquing the MCU's sexist representations of women. For years before the Black Widow movie was released in 2021, fans asked when BW would get her own film. While guest starring on SNL in 2015, well before the Black Widow film was greenlit, ScarJo poked fun at Marvel's poor track record with female representation by starring in a spoof trailer for a hypothetical Black Widow movie.
When it came to life in the big city, Black Widow had it all figured out.
Remind me to call whoever invented heels and leave them a nasty message.
A huge apartment, great friends, and an internship at Fashion Weekly.
Where's the new girl?
Sorry, here.
Leather with a low neckline. Take that off and put it on the cover of our magazine.
Can you say the rare moment that SNL makes me laugh?
Wow. Yeah, this actually was a good commentary.
When they're good, they're really good. And this was really good. I like how the far off projected year when this movie would come out, they still hadn't actually put out a film starring a woman yet. It would still be, I believe, another 2 years.
Wow.
The far-off future prediction was itself too conservative.
Yeah, she does this in 2015, and yes, that's years before the first actual movie with a female lead comes out for Marvel. It's honestly, my favorite Scarlett Johansson is the Scarlett Johansson who's feuding with Marvel and Disney. I think that's when she's at her best.
It's the only time I like her.
Yeah, she can be pretty problematic. She's not an amazing actress, but I love her when she's feuding with Marvel.
Yeah.
In 2021, ScarJo's love-hate relationship with Marvel turned into pure hatred when she sued parent company Disney. The reason? The star had negotiated a clause in her contract that would award her a percentage of the box office profits, something leads like Robert Downey Jr. had also received in the past. RDJ took home a whopping $55 million worth of box office profits for Avengers Endgame, but when Disney released the Black Widow film simultaneously on streaming and in cinemas during the pandemic, that decision arguably contributed to Black Widow's anemic box office performance, costing ScarJo the kind of payday her male counterparts received. Filed in July of 2021, the suit claimed Disney intentionally induced Marvel's breach of the agreement without justification in order to prevent Ms. Johansson from realizing the full benefit of her bargain with Marvel. ScarJo and Disney reached a settlement in September of 2021. The terms of the settlement were not revealed, but reports suggest it was in the tens of millions. I know it's hard to get up in arms about a millionaire being upset she was denied the opportunity to make even more millions. Like, I get that. It's hard for me. But do we think we can see this as an equal pay issue? Would they have breached a contract with Chris Pratt as blithely as they did with their biggest female star?
I mean, it's absolutely comparable because here's the thing. Okay, yes, the woman she can buy any damn thing she wants, but listen, I mean, we talk about this on the show a lot. People who are on this platform, they do inspire other people. They do have a domino effect. They do have an impact. Whether you like it or not, that's the case. And in Hollywood, when there's conversation about equal pay, it also happens in other offices outside of Hollywood. And that's a good thing. So like we were just saying, I loved that she took them on. I loved that this happened, but it's also so upsetting to know that it was even something that was happening after all this time when she's just about to leave. And she was the key female figure in this entire empire all this time. Like I look at Gwyneth Paltrow, who I also have my issues with, but that's a whole other thing. But like, she was kind of like the silent partner, the way a woman maybe should be, I guess, in Marvel's eyes, who was there from the start and was happy to take whatever crumbs she had. She didn't really need the paycheck, I guess, or maybe she just did it for the paycheck. And I think it's funny, there's somebody who's here. She's this woman with a big impact as well. She jokes about not even having watched any of the movies, and she's probably not joking, let's be real. And
no,
then you have Scarlett, who's actually really passionate about all of it and is really fighting for something. And I get the sense that Disney's probably not that eager then to work with her either, but that's what we need. You need somebody who's vocal like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think she was definitely on the right side of history with that lawsuit.
Yeah. As you said, she helped build them up to this point. There should have been some respect. Simple. You should have given, like, every one of those key Avengers actors should have a big fat bonus for thank you for saving our studio. Thank you for creating the billion-dollar industry as it is now. We owe you more money than we could ever convince ourselves to part with, but they should all be just handed a fat check that is equal to all of them. I can understand Robert Downey Jr. getting it, but she has been there since the third film in this series. At the point that she left, I believe, was film 23, 24? Possibly even a little bit higher on. Like the argument they made is, it's coming out at a time when there's not many people going to the theaters. These are extreme circumstances contractually. And it's not the first time that has happened. There are ways to deal with this. And Hollywood has them. Disney has them. And they simply chose not to. I suspect that there's more internally that we'll know eventually. But I still suspect that internal hidden knowledge is them screwing with her even more so.
Yeah. Can you imagine how much shit she's had to deal with in all those years, and probably the bullshit that she's had to listen to and like maybe had to turn the other way? Like, I just give her the fucking money. She deserves it. Jesus.
I feel like Scarlett Johansson went through a lot of shit making these movies, and they're also physically taxing. And the guys weren't getting objectified. They got to save the world, and no one was leering at their bottoms in the same way. Like, yes, I objectify Captain America, but that's not what I don't feel like the cinematographer is forcing me to. Whereas with Black Widow, it's like, why are there so many shots explicitly of her bottom?
Yeah, her signature move, her signature superhero landing has her ass up and her tits just so that you can look right down. And it's like, Thor just lands.
Yeah.
Hulk just lands.
Absolutely.
You know, there's not a moment when Thor now. I would love to see Thor lands, turns, shoots the ass out, and goes, yeah.
That'd be awesome. But it doesn't happen.
Chris, please, any Chris, not Pratt.
Not Pratt.
Not Pratt. No one wants that.
No one wants Pratt.
So while Black Widow has been the most controversial female-led Marvel movie, it wasn't the first. Captain Marvel, starring Oscar winner Brie Larson, premiered to mostly positive reviews in 2019. Here's an excerpt from a review by the always witty critic Richard Lawson for Vanity Fair. Quote, while we're still waiting on a star vehicle for Scarlett Johansson's dependable Black Widow, Captain Marvel beat her to the punch and punch and punch. Her film, directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, does a perfectly workable job for making this one small step. Here's a clip of Captain Marvel, also known as the First Avenger, standing up to her antagonist, the evil Jan Rog.
This war is just the beginning.
I'm not going to fight your war. I'm going to end it.
By the way, I hope I'm pronouncing Jan Rog correctly.
Yep.
The Marvel names are weird.
It's a very stupid name.
2 N's and 2 G's.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of consonants. Captain Marvel grossed over $1 billion worldwide, so it seemed like the MCU's new franchise was off to an excellent start. However, things got awkward when Brie Larson, an actress who is very outspoken about sexism and racism in Hollywood, took her place among the Avengers. Here's a clip of an uncomfortable interview with Entertainment Tonight Larson did with Chris Hemsworth and Don Cheadle to promote Endgame.
Is there any competition between the different groups?
There's no competition for me because I'm the strongest, so it's just kind of like a different...
Well, yeah, you should let her think that, but... Yeah.
It's not. As I've said before, it's not. It's just a fact. It's not a personal opinion. It's not a reflection on what you can't do, but it is also kind of a reflection on all that you can't do.
It's just that you're just not that strong.
So handsome as he is, Hemsworth can't accept the truth that many have pointed out, which is that Captain Marvel, with her super strength, super speed, and the gift of flight, is arguably the strongest Avenger, and most definitely stronger than Thor, who really needs that hammer. We can't know what motivated Chris to be so grumpy with Brie, but his comments come off as sexist microaggressions, like he's trying to keep the pretty blonde girl Avenger in her place. It's safe to say things have not been great for women and non-binary people in Marvel movies. Only 3 films so far have had female leads, assuming we include Black Widow, Captain Marvel, and Gemma Chan in Eternals. And I do include Gemma Chan in Eternals because I think she is the clutch member of that ensemble. I think that she gets, I believe, the most screen time. It starts out from her perspective. I think she's a lead. Of that tiny handful of women, however, all were portrayed by cisgender women. One reason things are often problematic for women in the MCU in front of the camera is because things are even more dismal behind the camera. The MCU movies didn't get their first female director until 2019, when Anna Boden co-directed Captain Marvel with a dude named Ryan Fleck. She didn't even get to direct the movie on her own. It wasn't until 2021's Eternals when Oscar-winning film director Chloe Zhao became the first woman to solo direct an MCU film. Unfortunately, some fans took offense to the Eternals cinematography, which had more of an elevated art house feel. Some jerks also objected to the fact that it included the MCU's first gay kiss. Ultimately, there was an effort to review bomb or downrate the movie on IMDb. Classy, guys! Perhaps the most horrifying fact about the MCU is a huge amount of the story shaping for its films, including Captain America and the first Avengers movies, was done by writer and director Joss Whedon. Whedon was once praised for writing strong female characters like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but we now know he abused many of his actresses while he was working with them in his TV days. It's not surprising this dude wasn't invested in creating a truly intersectional MCU. So let's discuss Whedon. What are your thoughts about him? Do you think he did a good job with this? Like, if we separate the art from the artist, do you think that he was good at shaping the MCU in an intersectional way or not? Like, I've already showed my hand. I don't think he was.
I definitely don't think he was, but I think that his failure led to a need, like an awareness that, oh shit, we gotta fix this. We have to do something better, and we have to do something better now. They didn't do anything better necessarily very quickly, but they did figure stuff out. And I actually want to throw another name in there alongside Whedon. So there was a guy called Ike Perlmutter, and Ike Perlmutter ran a lot of what you saw of Marvel on any screen. And Ike's a right-wing dickhead. He's best friends with Donald Trump, for instance. And this is the guy who had a ton of influence over Marvel, especially during the Whedon years. And so when a problem arose like that, he definitely wouldn't have addressed it. He's the guy who shelved the X-Men for being too weird, and typically it's believed for being queer representative, and made sure that all of the characters, the main male characters in the TV shows and the movies were like cookie cutter as all hell. He was one of the reasons why a lot of the problems persisted for years, and it was Kevin Feige slowly taking control over aspects of it that we finally reached the point where you don't have this overarching kind of old man smell over everything, just kind of making everything toxic and shitty.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't even know about this person at all.
Yeah, and that's like the high level of like their toy line, their television cartoon line. It's like high level executive power fighting. But from that, you get the willingness to deal with someone like Joss Whedon, the willingness to go find other creatives. Mm-hmm. And from there, you end up getting the reactions that are more than just like, oh yeah, that's a thing we'll deal with maybe eventually. No, we're not. Yeah. To actually working on it, coming up with solutions, and then taking positive and negative criticisms from those, and then making an even better version of the product.
Yeah, I think the tough part for me is Joss Whedon is somebody who there's been murmurs of his behavior for some time, but he only really was exposed recently, but he's been like a gestating cancer for some time, and he's been allowed to be because he's a name, and because he's been around for so long, and because, oh yeah, he's white and he's a man. And what I think is so interesting about him is that he's built his entire career on being a so-called feminist, and creating and backing these really strong female characters. I mean, I fucking love Buffy, and it's sad to me that this is the guy who's behind it. But what's really upsetting to me, though, specifically when it comes to movies like this, is that he can get away with this for years and years. He's probably going to keep getting away with it for a while. But then you have somebody like Chloe Zhao who comes in and does her first Marvel movie, critiqued to fucking hell and back. Like she, when you are a marginalized person and you get this opportunity, there's no room to fuck up. You get one opportunity and that's it. And I think about the same thing with Patty, who also was critiqued endlessly. And I mean, now you have, I'm excited for Blade. That's going to be out soon with Mahershala Ali, who I will watch at anything. Yep. But the South Asian director, Bassam Tariq, is going to do it. And I'm terrified for him because I can just imagine the pressure that he's going to face from not only the fans, but the studios and everybody. And I think it's going to do well because, I mean, it's Blade and it's Mahershala and this is a great director, but it doesn't really matter because that's not what people pay attention to. Women and marginalized people and anybody who falls into that group, the bar is just so high.
No, absolutely. It's funny that that is a way that these usually are reacted to. And I'm not seeing that one way or another from Moon Knight director Mohamed Diab. You'd expect to hear more about him, but all of praise and all derision is going right to Oscar Isaac for some reason.
That's such a good point. And I think part of it too is because these directors are either invisible or they are just complete fuck-ups. It's like you can only go in one direction. I don't think that, but I think that's the boxes that they are, or the cards they're dealt, right? And it's like, if you're doing well, we're not going to say anything, but if you're doing badly, we're going to come for you. And I would like to see some of them just get their flowers, let's put them on a platform. Let's say how fucking great they're doing. And so that they can get the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's how this works. And if we're not doing that from that spot, it's not going to happen down the line.
Yeah. And I'm happy that at the very least, Taika gets attention.
We love Taika. Taika's fantastic.
Everyone loves Taika. Taika dressed up as Hitler and you still like him. I mean, what the fuck?
I loved Jojo Rabbit.
It was so good.
It is interesting to me how Chloe Zhao, and this is definitely the intersection of racism and sexism, and just, she's a marginalized person, so people feel, fanboys, a certain type of fanboy, not all fanboys, feel emboldened to just talk shit about her. But she did the best cinematography of any Marvel movie. Like, artistically, it had the most artistic merit. And that was one of the issues. They thought that it was wrong because the visual language looked different. I'm like, it looked better. She elevated your favorite genre. Shouldn't you be thanking her?
It's really bizarre because The Eternals was directly created by Jack Kirby because he loved 2001: Space Odyssey. Mm-hmm. Eternals reflects that. It's 2001: Space Odyssey as a comic book. It is exactly what Jack Kirby wanted. Fans who don't understand that are looking for a fight.
Yeah. And I think a lot of them were.
Yes, a lot of the time. The only thing I would add is that don't we want to see something different? I mean, I think that's the other thing too. Marvel has such a cookie cutter template, and it's really cool when a director comes along and puts their own style onto it. I mean, that's exciting. That's growth. Let's move along with it. It's also not forever because they probably won't stay with it, but it's really interesting. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right. And ultimately, it's not like it was a 4-hour Terrence Malick film. It's not actually that weird.
No.
It takes a couple of extra seconds with shots. Yeah, there's a fight at the end. It's fine.
Also, can I just say, while we're here, I mean, a kiss, thank God. One thing that this whole universe is missing is a little bit of sex. And I think Eternals just hinted at it. They flecked it a little. And God bless Chloe for that. I mean, that's another thing. And when I say cookie cutter template, I mean, that's a part of it. Let's expand, guys. Let's do it.
There apparently was supposed to be a full-on sex scene there.
I heard this.
So
there was a little bit of one. Like there's a snippet of some missionary going on. But what's interesting to me is how they sexualize all the female characters, but no one has sex. Like all the female characters in the MCU are in these outfits that super objectify them, and then no one seems to be having sex. It's like, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. But it is this weird combination of objectification and puritanism that I guess is evolving and changing. And maybe there will be full-on sex in later movies. We can hope.
No, sir. They're just like Barbie dolls underneath their clothes. There's nothing there. Nothing is happening. It's plastic and plastic.
One thing that's interesting is that on TV, Marvel's women superheroes are actually some of their brightest stars. So that's a contrast with the movies of the MCU. The 2021 limited series WandaVision tells the story of a grief-stricken Scarlet Witch who reanimates her boyfriend Vision and traps an entire village in her fantasy of what it would be like to live in an American sitcom. The show was a favorite pandemic watch for many and ultimately earned 5 Emmy nominations, including Best Actress for Elizabeth Olsen, who portrays the Scarlet Witch, and a nod for Best Limited Series. In Marvel's 2021 Christmas-themed action-adventure series Hawkeye, Haley Steinfeld does get to study under the wing of Clint Barton, who is the original Hawkeye, showcasing her prowess with a bow and arrow. There's also Layla on the recently released Moon Knight, who is admittedly a love interest, but gets her fair share of action sequences and wisecracking lines. Marvel is also promising that its Ironheart series will give the MCU its first major non-binary character. And of course, we're all excited to see Kamala Khan, aka Ms. Marvel, grace our screens this summer. Starring Aman Vellani, Ms. Marvel tells the story of a Pakistani-American teen from Jersey City whose superpowers turn her into a hero.
I always thought I wanted this kind of life, but I never imagined any of this.
Do you know what you are?
I'm a superhero.
That sounds so fun.
I know, it makes me so happy.
MCU shows also employ a good number of women showrunners, which could be why they produce so many nuanced female characters. So why are Marvel's TV shows so full of strong, dynamic female characters when there are so few and far between in the movies?
I have to assume that the company, the studio, the universe, whatever you want to call it, they kind of feel like they're throwing them to the safer little corner. And that's where they can take a little bit of risk because the dollar that they're betting is not as large and they can just do it that way and it's easier. And it makes me really sad. But I think that's actually what a lot of studios do. It's not just Marvel. But I am very thankful that we've gotten these incredible and beautiful I mean, WandaVision is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That to me is just so fascinating and it's beyond genre. And I think that it's so cool to see what you can do with a Marvel property when you watch something like that. So maybe there is a little bit of truth to that, but I don't think necessarily. I think, again, it's one of those things that Marvel could lead the way and they could potentially with these shows. But then when you see what they put on the big screen, it's hard to believe that that's what they're following through with. I don't know. What do you think, Mikaela?
It all comes down to like these old equations of like presumption and audience and odd spheres of where one audience breaks off and where another goes, and then, of course, risk. So there's this belief that typically does get played out in terms of consumer habits, where women are more interested in serialized storytelling and men are more interested in like one and done or kind of segmented storytelling. So this breaks down typically into like a man will watch a movie and a woman will watch a TV series. Typically, viewership is higher among women for dramas, scripted comedies, scripted television than, say, men who watch events like sports and as well. It even goes for like presumptions of who watches news. Men watch events, women watch ongoing things. And you can get a lot more content for a lower budget and therefore lower risk on television. And so that's where the women typically get sent. You can generate a lot more press and a lot more interest in a TV show from female audiences. And that's just kind of like a rule across television for a lot less money. I hope that gets shattered. It should have been shattered long ago. It should have been shattered when Patty Jenkins made Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, such a massive success.
Yeah, and I think there's also this really, really ancient idea, and I mean, it was based on fact for a while, way back when, but that, women will turn out to see movies and TV shows and they'll read books that have male or female leads, but that men won't do that if it's just a female lead. They're just less likely to do that. I think that's become less true over the years, but here's my thing, and kind of going back to what I was saying before, properties like Marvel are the ones who can change that. You have WandaVision, which had such a big audience that was pretty, I would say was fairly split demographic wise. But I think what's interesting is you bring in these characters who were there from the beginning, who were in a collective like Avengers. You can bring anybody in. It's just about working on it. And it takes time, but we can get there. And Marvel could be the one who's leading that process. It doesn't have to be that black and white. It's so limiting.
And everything about WandaVision screams that it should have been primarily for a female audience. Wanda's the main character. Your main secondaries after Vision are Catherine Hahn, Kat Denning, and the third one, we've got Monica Rambeau as another Captain Marvel who appears. And it's a show about domesticity and the presumptions of childhood safety and family, and losing that part of you, losing your partner. It is a fundamentally female perspective show. And yet, I have never met a guy who was like, oh no, WandaVision's a chick show.
Oh, it's true. I watch it with my husband and my brother-in-law every week.
It's amazing. WandaVision did something.
I don't use this word lightly, but it was close to being a masterpiece. Like, it was one of the best pieces of television I've seen in the last decade. It was so innovative and original. The acting was superb. I mean, the scenes between Elizabeth Olsen and Catherine Hahn should be taught in theater programs. Like, just, they are such great scene partners. And it was amazing that Marvel, like, gave them the space to do that. They weren't trying to find more for Vision to do. He's a pretty ancillary character. I know it's called WandaVision, but it, emphasis on the Wanda in that. It was great that they gave space to some fantastic actresses. And let's hope they keep doing that. And I mean, Kamala Khan, like, it seems like they're going to give the space to a young woman, a young racialized woman, to be the star. And what I like is this show seems like a lot of fun, because Marvel can be really heavy. And so I'm happy that this is going to be fun and that it'll be just like a joyful experience cheering her on. This is really promising. And then you also have Layla and Moonlight, a show I don't really like, but I do appreciate how they updated the love interest role to make it seem less peripheral. Like, God, remember Rachel McAdams in Doctor Strange? That was the low point for Marvel love interests.
Because you can barely remember her in it. But anyway, like...
You have an Oscar-nominated actress and you give her nothing to do besides, like, the odd kissing scene.
It'll be really interesting to see what they actually give her to do in Multiverse of Madness, because surely at this point, anything, something, please.
Seriously.
So do you think Disney execs were always intending to integrate more racialized women and non-binary characters into the MCU? Or do you think that the diversity we're seeing, the increasing diversity we're seeing, is a response to the changing political climate in Hollywood?
I'm going to say hell no. I mean, in my opinion, I have a hard time thinking that they even thought about it. I don't know that they went that far way back in the beginning. I think it goes back to that quote from Lovely Bob, and their focus on what are the boys going to want to watch and what are they going to see. And I think that's, but that's one beautiful thing about when you can speak up and fans can have a voice and say, okay, this is what we want to see. This is where things should be going, and why social movements are so important. It's just, oh God, it's so slow. It's so slow.
What I think their approach would have actually been is they were probably hoping and holding out for Fox to fail faster so that they could get their hands back on the X-Men, because the X-Men is easy representation. You have a whole team of weirdos and foreigners and queers, and it doesn't matter. The first Black superhero woman appeared in 1999's X-Men. Halle Berry plays Storm.
Well, Mikaela, isn't X-Men also just this great analogy for marginalized people?
It's and like carte blanche. It's kind of whatever you need it to be at any point in time.
Yeah, it's true.
And like it's at its best when it's kind of not set to one specific representation, but like allows itself to like be a part of everyone. And I truly think that Disney probably looked at it and said, why would we invest in something new when we know this works? So let's just try to get this back so we don't have to think about it as much. And then we'll put out a Jean Grey doll, and we'll put out a Storm doll, and we'll put out a Rogue doll, and they'll all be Disney princesses. And then we'll put out a Wolverine doll, finally.
That's definitely their dream. I mean, like, Disney, they are buying up all the IP because they can't wait until they have all of these toys and all of these rides at Disney World. Like, as much as I like Disney Plus as a streaming service, when you go through it, you're like, this is terrifying. They own everything. This is really an emerging monopoly. We need to stop this.
Yeah.
So now the time has come for Hindsight is 2022, the segment where we choose the one moment that we might have handled differently if we were the subject of today's story.
I shouldn't have done that.
So, Sadaf, Mikaela, what would you guys have done differently?
I would have I think it's pretty obvious. I would have just liked to see a few more women. Anybody who's just a little darker than the shade of pale white, just be involved behind the scenes and making decisions. I would have loved to see that. And I would have loved to see it way back in the Iron Man days. I would have just liked them to do it early on. Maybe even give Gwyneth Paltrow a few more lines. Like, it starts from a pretty small place, but I'll take anything. Like, that's the only thing I can think of. It's just, it consumes my mind when I think about what I wish they would have done differently. Is just start earlier. Just see the fact that you make such an impact and you can influence so many people and run with it. It's a great thing.
Yeah, like, where's the Catherine Bigelow Marvel movie?
Ooh.
Like, she'd be perfect. She'd be amazing. Where is that? Where's the Lulu Wang Marvel movie? Give her a Marvel movie. Where's the Greta Gerwig Marvel movie? Let's do that too.
Sarah. I want to see them all.
So while you went big and systemic and try to fix everything at once, I think I'm going to go super specific and a thing that you could change with an editing suite. I would remove and reconsider the really, really way too on the nose use of "I'm just a girl" at the climax fight of Captain Marvel.
Yeah, good one.
It's too try hard. It's too on the. It's the same as the girls get it done scene in Endgame where it's just, oh, all the women are together and don't worry, we'll protect Captain Marvel. You'll protect Captain Marvel? She can fly in outer space without a suit. She can blow up suns with her fist. Why does she need Gwyneth Paltrow to protect her?
Yeah, it's so true.
Like,
it's a good one. It's so true.
There are moments where they do things right, but the times when they do things wrong and like, not like, oh, that was fundamentally a bad choice. It's like, that was a creative choice that you made trying to check off things and it just came off cheesy. I would change those two moments.
I love it. And Sarah, what about you? What would you change?
Well, I agree with Mikaela that anytime they try to do girl power, it's so blatant. It's like, there's basically a Spice... I'm surprised there hasn't been a Spice Girl song playing in the background where it's like, see, this is what the girls wanted. And we're like, no. We want more of these moments, not just more blatant moments, right? So that you can't miss it. Marvel does feminism. Like, that is really annoying. And it's such lip service because it doesn't make up for the lack of movies where women get to be the star. It doesn't. But I guess what I would do is, Marvel is famous for taking big swings. Like, borrowing billions of dollars from Merrill Lynch, that's a big swing. So I would have taken an even bigger swing and actually made Dazzler. I would have found a different director, not John Derek. And I would have just made that friggin' movie and made it the disco-iest, campiest thing ever and started my empire earlier. And imagine how different our world would be today. We probably would have had a disco Thor by now.
Sarah, I'm ready to invest. I would like for you to take this on, please, because I need this in my life now that I've heard about it.
Yeah, you had me at disco Thor.
Disco, I honestly think Thor really lends himself to disco. There needs to be a Thor musical. Yes. That is something I want. Marvel, please do like a full-on musical within the next few years. Like a movie musical. I don't want you to release a really shitty like Spider-Man type musical. Remember what happened with Spider-Man, guys, on Broadway? Don't do that. But a movie musical, big budget. Let's do that. Let's do Marvel's version of, say, like Grease. Or The Sound of Music.
Yeah, sure. I would love that. A period piece, take it back, even better.
I'm too amazed that you chose Grease with like Grease lightning and suddenly I'm seeing Chris Hemsworth in like a pompadour and leather jacket.
We could cast Travolta. I mean, this is beautiful.
You found some gold.
Thank you. Marvel, call me. Give me that Disney money, please. Okay, so this brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks as always to our dynamic producer, Joe Fish, and thanks again to our amazing guest, Mikaela Gorman. Mikaela, where can our listeners find you?
Everything I produce, over 200 podcasts, videos, and essays can be found at patreon.com/hereego. Check it out and maybe give me some money.
And if you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Twitter at _Sadaf. Sarah, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me at Sarah Sahagian. And if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. Thanks for listening.